Secretary General of the United Nations. Hello, very good morning. Many thanks for joining us here on GTV for the big breakfast show. My name is Abdul Hayi Moomen, and between now and the next 2 hours, we will be bringing you stories that made headlines within the week, and we will be doing a dissection of those stories. Of course, you are aware that the 2019 budget statement was read to Parliament by the Minister for Finance, and the newspapers have reported extensively on that. On the Friday, November 16th edition of the Daily Graphic, the headline says, Government unveils ambitious plan to grow economy by 7.6% in 2019. And the Ghanaian Times reported on Friday, or yesterday, that Agenda for Growth 2019 budget focuses on massive infrastructural development. We also bring you stories on utility tariffs because the TUC is calling the PRC is calling on the PURC to see to it that utility tariffs are reduced. We'll bring you details of those stories, and later we'll also look at the growth in tertiary education as 2 more universities are in the offing. KNUSC has reopened. Good news for all those students of that great school, but we are also told that they should be prepared for intensive classes so that they can make up for the time that has been lost. We'll bring you all those later, but let's take a quick look at what some of the newspapers have been reporting. Of course, the Ghanaian Times here, and it says, Agenda for Growth 2019 budget focuses on massive infrastructural development. Government to spend 73.4 billion next year. That is a story on the front page of the Ghanaian Times. You can find it right there, the front page of the Ghanaian Times, and also on the front page of yesterday's edition of the Daily Graphic. It's right here. Government unveils ambitious plan to grow economy by 7.6% in 2019, but minority says it's empty, uninspiring, and hopeless. We'll look at that later. And of course, you remember when the finance minister did present the mid-year review budget, there was a 35% tax that was imposed on earners of 10,000 Ghana cedis and above as monthly salary. We are being told here, as the finance minister delivered the budget statement, that 35% tax on 10,000 Ghana cedis scrapped. Income above 20,000 now attracts 30%. We will have some time to look at the reasons for which this tax was scrapped. And then, of course, we have some newspapers on from Thursday. Reduced power, water tariffs. TUC demands 15% decrease. That's the major story on the front page of the Ghanaian Times on Thursday. But again, on the same issue, it was also reported by the Daily Graphic on Thursday, the same issue of tariffs, reduced utility tariffs. TUC tells PURC, and I'll be asking my panelists this morning if there was any mention of utility tariffs and whether or not there are indications that it will be reduced as we listen to the budget when it was being read. But earlier in the week, the Ghanaian Times had reported that 2 more universities in the offing, government to launch infrastructure fixing working plan, and of course there was also a sad incident of 4 people dying in a horrific accident. We'll bring you details as we move on. My panelists will have joined me. I'll introduce them very shortly, but that will be after we return from this break. Please stay with us. Welcome, sir. We are about to kickstart the discussion, and I have been joined by three gentlemen, and I'll introduce them from my immediate left. Doc, Doc, thank you very much for joining us. You know, you are no stranger to this show, and and more especially because we will be concentrating a lot more on the budget statement. I'm excited that you are here this morning, and we have in the middle the lawyer Edwin Kusi. Lawyer, thank you very much for coming. It's been a while since you appeared on the show. Yes. And I'm also excited to welcome you, Mr. Boahim, because you are with the academia, and the issue of universities came up strongly again. The introduction of 2 new universities, and of course also the reopening of the KNUSC, which we did talk about. Thank you very much for joining us. Let me start the discussion by looking at, of course, what we all witnessed on Thursday, the budget statement that was delivered by the finance minister, and the Daily Graphic here reports that after an anxious wait for the 2019 budget, the finance minister, Mr. Ken Oforiatta, appeared in Parliament yesterday in his signature all-white kaftan and delivered a 178-page speech in a motion that seeks to double investments in public infrastructure and lay a solid foundation for a Ghana that can survive beyond aid. On the theme, a stronger economy for jobs and prosperity, the 2019 budget is the government's third and the country's first revenue and expenditure estimation instrument since 2015 that does not bear traces of the International Monetary Fund and its well-known restrictive conditionalities. It follows a planned exit from the IMF's extended credit facility program in December this year, after it has helped to stabilize the economy from the fiscal slippages it suffered between 2012 and 2016 and returned it to the path of growth. In a virtually 2-hour-long presentation characterized by boos and cheers, Mr. Oforiatta unveiled an ambitious plan to build upon the gains achieved in the last 2 years and create jobs and prosperity for Ghanaians. While the government assured the people that the 2019 budget provides hope for the future, the minority in Parliament had said the budget could only be one of gloom and doom. The plan aims to boost domestic revenue generation and rein in public spending to help grow the economy, and the story goes on and on. But minority says it is empty, uninspiring, and hopeless. The minority in Parliament has described the 2019 budget presented by the Minister of Finance, Mr. Ken Oforiatta, as empty, uninspiring, and hopeless, as it does not offer any measures to reduce the suffering and hardship of Ghanaians. They said the budget failed to spell out measures to rescue companies from collapse and stop the increasing layoff of workers, whilst the economic targets for 2019 were not achievable. Besides, it said the budget was anchored on more borrowings, which would tie the hands of successive governments. The minority leader and the National Democratic Congress Member of Parliament, MP for Tamale South, Mr. Haruna Idrisu, the ranking member on the Finance Committee of Parliament, and the minority spokesperson on finance, Mr. Kesel Atoforsen, and the NDC MP for Ketu South and former Minister of Transport, Mr. Fifi Kwete, made the observations yesterday in a separate interview with the Daily Graphic, and it also goes on and on and on. But basically, government says 2019 the economy will grow by 7.5%. Minority says, look, this budget does not address the suffering of the people. Doc, you are an economist. Tell me, this budget, having listened to it, what does it present to Ghanaians, the ordinary man out there?
Thank you very much. First, I will say good morning to your cherished viewers. The presentation on Thursday was in tandem with what some of us had proffered before the presentation. Now, what does it bring to the ordinary Ghanaian? This has been the question for some time now. You are called to address certain issues, and the presenter tells you how does the economic postulations reflect in the pocket of the ordinary Ghanaian. I would take this opportunity to briefly explain why the government will talk about making enough payments, and yet people would say the payments are not reflective in their daily lifestyle and livelihood. The current administration came into office, under the presumption of embarking on some infrastructure projects. But I remember very well that last year some of us had to prevail on the government to cave into the principle of succession plan, which basically implies the projects started under the previous administration, which are ongoing and not yet completed, should be reviewed carefully, and if the contractual arrangements are worthy of continuation, then the project should be carried out to a logical conclusion before new ones are started. The purpose for this suggestion is to avoid piling up of undue debts, and we should also wean ourselves off post-administrative lawsuits of causing financial loss to the state. What it helps us to do is that we are able to document and effectively follow on our developmental path. So we know when projects A, B, C, D are completed, then you can effectively move on to projects E, F, G, and that order. You realize the government bought into some of these suggestions, reviewed the projects that had been awarded ostensibly in 2015 and 16, and were still ongoing and had to be continued. Now, with these projects, you realize in most cases, not only under the previous administration, but under most administrations, governments award contracts, but the payments are not forthright. The payments are deferred. So the contractor may have to seek funds from elsewhere to commence the project while awaiting government's payment. What it means is that in 2015 and 16, especially when the establishment of the day senior high schools, the construction of roads took place, the contractors were paying the workers at that time. However, the money from the government was not forthcoming. Now, the current administration decided to continue with the project. So what do you have to do? Assuming office means you take up the responsibility left behind. Now, last year and this year, most payments made by the government were to projects that had already been commenced in 2015 and 16, for which the contractors had already paid the workers. So when the government makes payment to the contractor is left with two options. One, if some borrowing was made, you pay the financial institution. If whatever is left is your profit, you also keep it perhaps to you, yourself, and your immediate family. Now, you realize in some cases, not full payments have been made by the government. So if there is this percentage of completion in terms of payment, then the contractor would await the outstanding balance to continue with the project to its logical end. Now, what it also means is that if the full payment has not been made, the contractor might not call back the workers back to site to continue with the work. So people will begin to have a negative feel of the situation. So the government indeed has made enough payments in the system, but the systems went to offset outstanding government arrears. So you will not feel it immediately. The truth is that people felt the impact in 2015 and 16 while working, and therefore presumes when you say you make payments now, they should be continuing to work. And when this is not forthcoming, then you might be misleading the people. But in real economic terms, that is what actually happened. Now, to make sure that the current budget reading does not become a facade or a mere economic rhetoric, as some people would put it, but then an actual. That is why next year you realize most of the projects under the previous administration are near completion, and therefore new ones could be rolled out, and I'm sure we'll come to that. And that is the basis for the massive infrastructure infrastructure project we would see in the country next year. Most of our people are in somewhat the informal sector, and you realize because of the limited level of education we have, now trying to improve upon it, we have many people in the articraft or handicraft sector of the economy: masons, carpenters, welders, steel benders, painters, and what have you. When these people are not called to work, they presume the economy is not functioning as you put in it. And therefore, when the various infrastructure projects start next year, they will be called back to work. They will begin to earn wages. Some will earn salaries on a weekly, monthly basis. It would go beyond these individuals to have a positive effect on their families. And even people who sell as a means of livelihood, like our water sellers, rice sellers, the fried yams and what have you, would also be able to be engaged more than they are now, because these construction workers in most cases may even require extra meal to be heavy to be able to be on the job. So next year people will begin to have a positive feel. Again, it looks as if there was some amount of dormancy between last year and this year with regards to effective government developmental projects which people expect to translate into their active livelihood. And this is the basis for the usefulness of the current budget reading. Next year, people begin to have a real feel of what
you seem to be very confident of this absolutely this fact. But the minority says, and I read it earlier, that yes, it's empty, uninspiring, and hopeless, as it does not offer any measures to reduce the suffering and hardship of Ghanaians. And so the minorities call is...
The minorities call, as I explained on another platform yesterday, is no surprising. Now, if you should engage them in camera to ask why such pronouncements were made, they will tell you it's tit for tat. Because while in government, whatever they present, the then minority, now majority, would also say there is nothing in it for the ordinary Ghanaian. So it's a more of a political submission, but not an economic objective submission. I look at it from economic angle and what it stands to benefit the entire populace. So if you look at it from a political angle, you will not like to heave or shower praises on your opponent to be seen to be doing well. But I look at it from a pure economic angle. And once again, I say this because if you are able to make some suggestions and they are heeded to, and people begin to have some challenges understanding those implementations, then it behooves you to try to trumpet what it actually stands for. So if I seem to be confident in what is actually happening, it's as a result of what has been presented. And the prelude, what most of us expected or talked about or suggested yesterday to be included, have all been mentioned in here. And since we are living witnesses to the payments made last year and this year, and what the payments were meant for, you would expect that if the project should start next year, some projects may even commence for payments to be deferred by the government. Others will have immediate payments effected. And therefore, people begin to have a feel of it. It will even transcend the effect of people selling around this construction site. If the water seller will come to sell, it means she will go to the market to buy the rice, buy the necessary ingredients from the market seller.
You made that point, so let me bring Mr. Edwin Kusi into the picture now. Did you have time to listen to the more than 2 hours plus?
Yes, I was driving and other things, so I was listening in between all the things I was doing, and subsequently I've had the opportunity to read a bit what was presented. So let me begin from the story. I have always had a problem with different factions of governments, and when I say that, I mean at one time NDC is in power, they read a budget, MPP says it's utterly useless. And then MPP reads a budget, NDC says it's useless. I assume that maybe subsequently the minority will come out with a more poignant, more describable reason for some of the assertions they make. What they should realize that most Ghanaians are educated. We are always developing ourselves, and we would always demand accountability from all our leaderships. we don't just want blanket statements. We want informed, critical decisions that come out from everything that they do. And we expect that from them. They should later digest the budget and come out with the negatives that in a positive way to help develop the economy. Ultimately, all parties must remember that they work for Ghana. They work for us. We are the CEOs. And all of them are political servants, not political masters. And it is important that at every point, they're looking for the total good of all Ghanaians. So if there's something in the budget that is good, it is all right to say it is good. If it is bad, it is bad. Then we all look at it and see the next way forward. Now, having looked at the budget myself, I saw some difficulties with it, and I saw some very good things with it. The difficulties, which I don't know whether I can ascribe to government per se, is that government seeks to spend 73 point something billion cedis. 4.4 billion cedis. Yet the revenue they are going to get is about 54 point something. There is going to be 58.9
billion.
Yes, so there's going to be a deficit. I have always had problems with these issues of deficit that we have always had, because that means that we need other persons to finance us, and usually those finances don't come. But governments almost always are pushed to spend more than they raise, because all of us, our expectations are huge. We expect that government does A, B, C, D all at once. And so we push them. And being politicians, they are afraid that they will lose their stance, so they have to spend more than they actually earn. It doesn't make good sense at all, in my view. Because if I'm running my home and my salary is 40 cedis, and at the end of the day, I spend 200 cedis, then I am running myself into a problem which will not just affect me, but the rest of my family. So gradually, governments must begin to become more realistic in those areas. I think that would help us a lot. The second thing is that I realized that they're going to spend about 16 point something billion on interest payments alone. I know that it may not be a government's fault per se, because all the governments have borrowed over time and you have to service those loans. So it is like somebody waking up one day and you are diagnosed with a disease. You didn't get it one day. You got it over time, probably with your eating habits, the way you were not exercising, and all of those things. So it is like all the governments have a fault in that. But importantly and painfully, that 16 billion cedis,
18.6 billion,
18.6 or so, could have actually financed the deficit we would have needed for the investment that they need to make, which is
more
huge.
than that.
It's more.
The deficit is 14.5 billion, but the interest payment is 18.6 billion. 18.6 billion.
Yes.
So yeah. Right.
So you see that is the painful aspect of it, and those, in my view, are the difficulties I found with the budget. But I found so many good things with the budget. To begin with, I was actually happy with the infrastructure development that was going to happen, because for a long time everyone has been complaining, especially with our roads. And I always ask myself this question whenever I'm driving on the roads, that over the years we say we are building roads, yet almost everywhere the roads are spoiled. So what happened? Were they not built, or were they shabbily built? Which brings me to one important intervention. They said they were going to have an asset management organization also that will scrutinize all these infrastructures that are made. It is very crucial, because I have a sneaky feeling that the roads may have been built, but may have been poorly built.
So on the issue of even roads, I noticed that some roads were mentioned last year that they were slated for construction. It appears those roads were not constructed, yet monies were allocated for the construction. Then this year I had same roads. So the question is, the money that was allocated in the 2018 budget, for instance, which was supposed to go into the construction of a particular road, but that road wasn't constructed. What happened to that money? Yes, what happened to it?
Let me explain.
Okay.
You see, in most cases, this is what happens with the budget. The budget is an estimation. It's a projection, what you look to do in the coming year. Now, the various ministries present their estimations to the finance ministry for disbursement. Now, when they present, depending on the availability of funds, the finance ministry would make outright release of the total demand by a particular ministry to it, or make partial release of funds to that ministry. So when the funds are released, the ministry would intend prioritize the allocation of the funds that have been released by the finance ministry. So you would have heard in the budget that roads A, B, C up to Z would be constructed in the coming year. But the successful implementation of this particular initiative will hinge on the release of the complete funds for the construction of those roads. So if the expectation is that these roads will be constructed, now the Ministry of Roads and Highways, or the Ministry of Roads and Transport, before the minister reads this, has already presented the budget to the finance ministry. Now after its reading, we'll go back and look at our funds. In some cases, the funds will be rolled out in the course of the year as we are able to rake in more money. So if by the end of the year, all the roads have not been necessarily constructed, there are some that are outstanding. They will be brought forward into the following year until everything is completed. Let me cite another example. You realize the construction of the Eastern Corridor.
I know you have a lot to say.
There's just an example to go on.
Okay.
The Eastern Corridor Road, if we would cast our minds back, it used to feature in the budget for about 4 consecutive years, and still it has not been completed, because of the quantum of money required to complete it. So perhaps for every year, the government estimates that would pump in or invest this much money to make sure some portion of it is completed. So some of these announcements, we shouldn't be surprised, will be made until all the projects are completed and new ones are also rolled out. That is what it is contingent on the availability of funds. That is what
I wanted to quickly finish. So, I saw the issue of infrastructure development. It's something that is very good. I was particularly happy, being living in Tema, to hear that the motorway will be expanded.
And it has started, right?
And yes, I see that they are patching some potholes on it.
The main
yes. And I hear that the Kumasi and the Accra to Kumasi and Accra to Takoradi roads, which I also travel often on to courts, will be made dual carriage roads. And I remember all the number of people that have died needlessly by road collisions. I mean, these are the things that we want to hear. Over the years, I have asked myself that in other jurisdictions, people are going to the moon. You go to a country that has 6-7 lane roads. And why is it that in Ghana, most of our roads are 2 narrow lanes? There are no street lights anywhere. Everywhere is so dark.
And most of the accidents you find are head-on collisions.
Yes.
Avoidable accidents.
Very avoidable ones.
Double lanes.
So I mean, there are a lot I saw in the budget that I was happy about. What government needs to do, because for now, a lot of people realize that government has good intentions, but they are not seeing the returns very quickly in terms of letting things happen quickly. What they need to do, because in my opinion, they have only 2 years before they are assessed again. If they have to go for loans, Sino-Hydro or whatever it is, they have to really expedite process. They really have to focus on getting the money to really do the things they say they're going to do. Because often when you speak to people, what they say is that, the government, they talk plenty, but they're not doing much. Yet, if you look at the things that they have put on paper, they are good things that any Ghanaian, any fair-minded Ghanaian would be happy about. You get it? All that they need to do is to really actualize what they say they're going to do. And so, and if they're able to do that, this will be a very good budget. In my view, it's not a bad budget at all. It promises jobs, it promises a lot of things that a lot of normal, ordinary Ghanaians are hoping to see.
Mr. Brian, yes, did you have time to listen?
Yeah, I listened to some portion and then I read, but I've read everything under the budget. Yeah.
And it gives you hope as a guardian?
Yes, like lawyer said, you know, it has positives, it has negatives. My understanding of the budget is that it promises a very good future for especially the youth of Ghana. But before I start commenting on the budget, I want to believe that, you know, issues of subjectivity and objectivity are very important. And when it comes to political decisions, you know, certain political directions for our country, I think that it is the responsibility of the two major political parties, you know, to join hands together and to define some of these directions. Because going forward, certainly, as you remain in democracy, it will be your turn. And when it is your turn, and you're also coming up with very good plans, you know, what do you think the other party will also do? Politics, good, but if you don't handle it well, it can also be bad. So, as a country, we need a direction. And we cannot set our direction without budgets, which is very important because it defines the resource base of the country and how we are going to use our resources. Personally, I believe that the issues in the budget, as people will put it, very ambitious. In fact, as a human being, you have to be ambitious. 7.5 growth rate, right?
7.6.
7.6.
Overall real GDP growth rate.
Yes. My question is it beyond Ghana? Or is it that we cannot achieve it? Looking at our resources and everything, is it not possible we can or even do better? That is my question. If you are able to bring our resources together and we are able to manage the resources very well, right? These issues of single lanes that we travel and people die, just that, you know, will be a thing of the past. When Ghana had independence, where was Germany? Where's Germany? They had just come out of war and they were putting their things together. And between then and now, Germany is about the 4th largest economy in the world. Think of China. When we had independence, even all that we knew about China was these Chinese movies.
Yes, true.
Yes. And look at where China is now. That we go to China and go and beg them for $2 million, $2 billion, and then we release our resources to them, just like that.
No,
15 billion, was it not?
No, the current one, the 2 billion, we will come to that.
No problem.
So, just like that,
for me,
it's a blanket statement.
For me, if you are able to, you know, look at all these things, and the government set its own priorities, you know, the second aspect of the ambition, I just want to put it across.
Okay.
You see, if government would set priorities in certain areas, and like lawyer was trying to articulate, if you put so many things together, wanting to achieve everything at a go, if you are not careful, you end up achieving nothing. But if you can prioritize specific areas, that this year, even though we have A, B, C, D needs, let's concentrate on these areas. Then, with our limited resources, we are able to manage it very well. Then we are moving forward. The next budget takes care of other things that we couldn't do last year, you know, so that gradually we'll be moving. What it means is that when you look at our revenue generation and our expenditure and the deficit that is coming, it is because of the ambition that we've attached to this budget. You know, so always governments will go, come up with a budget, and then the deficit is so huge that you can't even bear it. So where do you go? Donors, donor countries. And the last time we were here, we were talking about increasing budget, the public debt. You remember?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And we came up with so many, you know, discussions that to the extent that if you are not careful, at a point in time, Ghana, if you are not careful, we are going to be declared as a failed state. And that will be too much for us. If you are not careful, what is going to happen is that one day people are going to say that you are not creditworthy. And when it gets to that point, who are you going to borrow from? So my point is that as a country, we need to know where we fit in, what our resources are, how we can develop our resources, how we can plan it, you know, so that we spend within our means. And as we do that, gradually we will be overcoming some of these difficulties that we always bring. I will call it artificial difficulties.
If you're talking about spending within our means, we are told that over 70% of the revenue we generate as a country goes into paying public sector workers. So we'll be left practically with only 30% of your revenue to attend to issues of health, infrastructure, education, you know, and so on, which will be woefully inadequate. You will definitely need to look to other sources for funding.
Are you also aware that countries that have developed also survive mostly on entrepreneurs? So what are we doing as a country to bring out entrepreneurs? What are we doing as a country to motivate young people to develop their own businesses? You know, if certain countries have been able to encourage family businesses to grow even into top businesses, multinational businesses, can't we do the same?
Okay, so we have a Ministry of Business Development, we have an agency, the National Entrepreneurs, the one headed by John Kuma, and so on. So these initiatives, we will be told, are there, except that we probably are not seeing the millionaires and billionaires being created in this country.
So the question is, do we need people who already have made it, like Despite and the rest, to keep creating businesses for people when people, young guys, have talents that we've not been able to tap into?
Okay, that is true.
You see, if you are able to do that, if you are able to bring, I was reading an article by a US professor, and he was talking about the entrepreneurial drive of US, that they have entrepreneurship clubs, you know, from the basic level to the university level. And so people go in there, and by the time the person is done with the higher grade, the person is already set, you know, to create a business for himself. And look at all these big businesses in the US. You know, look at these Yahoo brothers and others. That is what we need. In fact, I've taught a boy who majored in IT and was able to win 2 awards internationally. You understand? And that boy is working for a company in Ghana. When that boy could have been picked, you know, and could have been trained further, set up, managed by consultants for the guy to do something.
Okay, so your point is that...
My point is that if you are able to do some of these things, one, we are creating more jobs, issues of budget deficits will be reduced, and at a point in time will be done with. Then government does not even have that burden of even saying that I am going to put in a budget estate development cost, road construction, and big companies will be in Ghana who will be taking care of those things as their corporate social responsibility initiatives.
Okay, Doc, very quickly, so we move on to the other issues. I see that you want to respond to
yes, that they mentioned. Edwin talked about the interest payment, which is rightly so, and like the angle from which he came, the 18.6 billion is not necessarily interest payment that has been accumulated under the current administration. It is born out of our prior debt that we have contracted, and you realize between 2014 and 16, because of our economic challenges, we were contracting loans at a relatively high interest rate from the investment partners, and this has contributed strongly to the high interest payment we have. And also under the previous administration, the challenge we had as a nation was resorting to this economic strategy of borrowing short to pay short. It means they go in to borrow for a short period of 1 year, 2 years to pay for a debt that is due, and therefore we had high interest payments on hand, and that is what has contributed to that. The Sino-Hydro deal is not a loan. It is a 21st century barter transaction. What it means is that the country is fortunate enough to get the $2 billion, not pay back in terms of money, but then would award the Chinese government the value of $2 billion in bauxite to be mined to offset the cost, and that is what it is. And I think Mr. Bowen said we are giving our bauxite just like that. Now it is even something difficult to get market for some of your produce, and if you should be able to get this money under this particular transaction, then you may count yourself somewhat lucky, because you have the money from infrastructural development. If you put the money to good use, you will not pay back, but then you would be able to also develop the bauxite base depending on the equipment that will be set up by these investors. Now the third one has to do with the mention of excessive borrowing. I think I've not been on this program to explain that. Ghana's debt to GDP for last year example was 69.8%, and people were crying wolf. So some of us had to quickly research to find out if indeed it is on the high side. Now look at the whole world. 2017, Japan had the highest debt to GDP of 253%, followed by Greece with 179%. You had the likes of Lebanon 148%. Cape Verde came in for 129.2%. You have the likes of Portugal 126.2%, Jamaica 122.8%. The 10th is Singapore 112%. Now, if you put this aside, the United States debt to GDP 2007 were 105.40%, all in excess of what they want. And not only that, you realize I've mentioned Cape Verde, a West African neighbor, with a relatively small economy, but borrowing more than she could even mobilize in terms of revenue. You also look at Mozambique.